Here we are at the famous Lyceum, Aristotle's famous school, and as you know, both Aristotle and the Lyceum have played a very important role in Western thought. So for instance, well, even down to today, so for instance, Aristotle's emphasis on careful observation of objects in their context, that is still with us today. As we've heard in some sessions earlier this morning, things like virtue ethics, the kind of ethics that Aristotle discussed, that is still a very live discussion for ethicists today. Right? So there are a number of ways in which Aristotle's influence continues to reverberate, even if we don't think his natural philosophy is the right way to describe the world. Right? There's still wisdom lessons that we have learned from Aristotle. So we have a bit of time, and as Gregory mentioned this morning in his address, I'd like to open things up for anybody to give just a 3-minute reflection on the meaning of Aristotle and the Lyceum, either something from history or a way in which that you see that influence being transmitted today. I'm not going to call on but who would like to start?
I'm not sure if it takes 3 minutes. It's a
okay.
lot, but yeah. Okay. And I actually talk about Aristotle in my classes because I'm a law professor, and we have this concept of Euripides, and in which you cannot just apply abstract law to every case, because you have exceptional cases that you need to understand. You have to have this capacity, this ability to judge this particular case and adjust the norm, adjust the rule to this special case. This is the use of the logic, the use of a law and law, because you cannot apply law blindly. And that's it. And that's why Aristotle says that in a sense, Euripides is above the law, in a sense of justice as law, because Euripides kind of bends the law to the special case. And that's it.
Thank you.
With a backdrop of opera.
It's a very brief piece. I just admire Aristotle for critiquing his local fellow Plato, moving from the rationalism to the empiricism, and certainly, like in terms of let's study, as you say, things in their place. Let's actually cut things open and see versus just go with the mind. And that's certainly a tradition that has blossomed, taken off that empiricism. So that's all. Thanks, Aristotle.
Also, I teach Aristotle in 2 of my classes. One is my ethics class. It's for undergraduate students, and I also teach Aristotle in a symbolical logical class. That was like a high-level philosophy class. When I teach ethics, of course, I will talk about Aristotle's virtue ethics. Things you were talking about, stories, actually I always start with the stories. I call it a make-up case. I made up case to let my students discuss. I ask them, do you have a driver's license? They say yes. So I say, how about you drive a truck from uphill to downhill? Suddenly you find out that everything your truck out of work, except you can still control the steering wheel. And then you find out that on one side, that's 3 kids playing, the other side, there are 5 adults. In front of you, it's a mountain. What are you going to do? You can use your practical wisdom to make choices. That's the only thing you can do, because you can still control the direction. So my students always have good discussion. They say we're not going to hit kids, but we don't want to hit the adults. And then they were making an assumption: what if the adults are criminals from escaping from jail? Shall I just turn the side and they can run if they want? We don't want to hit them, but they can run faster than the kids. So in that way, we talk about the golden means. What is the best choice? We have to talk about the best choice, and in the way we call it intermediate. That's when I teach Aristotle's ethics. When I teach my logic class, always start with Aristotle's logic. That's the way. Nobody can shake off Aristotle. We talk about in Aristotle's concept of definitions, concept of propositions. When we tending to talk about his categorical propositions, it's always a challenge for the students. But later on, from there we can move to his deductive concept, deductive logic. Law of identity, law of no self-contradiction. That's what I was talking about Aristotle.
I would like to share my experience with Aristotle. I wrote my PhD about Aristotle. Aristotle is the first master in the world. Why he is the first master in the world? Because he created a logic. And in the Arabic culture or in the Islamic culture, the second master around the world also Al-Farabi. Because Al-Farabi created the Islamic logic. In our, my traditionals, as an Arabic civilization, we use a golden mean of Aristotle, that the moderation between two vices and the mean between these are two vices. So he selected the moderation, and the Arabic culture, every time the Arabic culture or the way that follows by the Arabic culture is a moderation. It means that the moderation comes from the Aristotle. Also Aristotle is Aristotle. If you're talking about Aristotle, it means the logic. If you would like to see the logic, Kant say that the Aristotle never give us any chance to add any idea to the logic that is So that's it. Thank you very much.
Completed science, Aristotle completed.
Others wanted to talk.
Okay, I'll speak about something. I also taught Aristotle, both in my physics class and ethics. I'll just briefly see what I learned from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. The first time I read and also later on taught my students is a standout in book 1. He talked about this in English translation, happiness. Okay, new translation, doing well, faring well in life. This is the idea. Eventually, it's become part of myself as well. Right, thinking about what's the life goal. So many things also accept this idea. So Aristotle's teleological argument in this regard is very influential to me. Second part I think is very influential to me is his functional argument, thinking about human beings, how to identify ourselves. His teacher Plato has a theory, but Aristotle essentially just see human beings should be identified as a particular function. That's a rational function. Right? It's a very famous definition. Is rational being function well according to perfect virtue. So this is also the third thing that I think Aristotle is very influential to me. Is Aristotle, whenever they study something, it is always systematic. Study from the conceptual framework, their structure and genus, species, and this from the very typical example. So they characterize virtue also in terms of state of character. The fourth thing that I think influenced on me is Aristotle's idea about pleasure. In English, in particular, right, we don't tell the difference. What's in ordinary language? What's happiness? What's pleasure? Aristotle makes this very famous. His definition of pleasure is when you do certain activity, you do well, the pleasure will come to you. You cannot single-minded pursue pleasure, never get it. The last point I think is Aristotle's Nicomachean book 10. He talked about this, the highest degree activity, the best happiness you can get is through contemplation, a philosophical activity. So I think that's part of which encourages me getting into philosophy.
All right, okay. Thank you.
Come on,
Other
is there
reflections?
anyone?
Let's
your mind. We have a, this is a
I think given the walking here, peripatetic.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that we're talking about Aristotle today, but I do teach Aristotle in different classes, but one thing's always tension when I teach medieval philosophy, because in medieval philosophy, St. Thomas Aquinas, great admirer of Aristotle, and then you see Augustine, who was a great admirer of Plato. So this kind of tension, it's a whole medieval philosophy was wrestled us, and I guess it was a gift to us. We wrestle still, Plato or Aristotle, because they all have a valid place in our hearts and resemble what we really feel about nature, surroundings, relationships, love, or even modern things like computers. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Anything you'd like?
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
It's great actually to remember these ancient forefathers. So at the same time, we were just discussing there with my friends there sitting there. Actually, we can see that Aristotle was not that much accepted or anything in Athens. Probably Plato, he didn't get the, we have read that he didn't get the position in Academy, Plato's Academy, so he had other pursuit and power, basically in association with Alexander and all that things, yeah. And then another point what I was thinking actually, how come such a rational thinker be insensitive towards slaves and women? Yeah, in my presentation also the topic was about the history of philosophy, where philosophical forefathers were not really sensitive, gender sensitive. Philosophy had been always very patriarchal. So Aristotle also had done his own part in in making this history patriarchal, I would say. So we can see in Aristotle also the statements as if women are not rational beings, they are mutilated men, and also we can see that the system of slavery was quite accepted. This is quite confusing and giving us, of course, tension when we think about the philosophical forefathers. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So this is a good thought, very good thought. May I comment a little bit? You know, I really say that this is a good reading, because some people read Plato as a representative of feminist school of thought, and that was one tradition. But I'd like to point out that Aristotle is very complex in nature. Maybe he didn't say that he was, a slaver. So he mentions in his book that slaves has to rebel. If you accept that being, acceptance, that's a different story. He wasn't saying that there is a slave, but if you accept this position, it's your choice. That's, again, it's based on your rationality and self-dignity. So he believed that, even if we know that story, some Plato or whoever was philosophers who were enslaved and they become free. So he wanted freedom, and that's another thing. As for not getting job in Athens in Plato's Academy, he was not Athenian, I remember. But despite of that, he got position of, or he organized his school. It's like saying that there is a way to a really talented person to find out and make acceptable to society and show that he's a true statesman, as you said, and great man. As for, he was accused by being teacher of the great Alexander. And when the story was telling, and it was telling about who he is, when he said that democracy fought once with Socrates, and we don't want it to twice fall, so I rather to escape. And that's what he did, because he saw that a rational thing, because based on his virtue ethics, not to suppose, but he gave reasons. another sense which is raising, because culture was, he was asking his Alexander when he traveled to bring species, to bring samples, which was make his biology, zoology so impressive, because he was asking what to bring to you, not gold, not anything, but books, and bring something precious, which is species. So thanks so much.
Thank you. It was a good response. But of course, in that connection also, we have this issue that of bringing books between many from different places. Libraries were really damaged in those places where invasion by Alexander happened. Then, an Asian area also, of course. These are things which really worries a person from philosophy, I think, because this play of power, how come it is that much associated with philosophers, and especially people who write about ethics, virtue, and things like that. So it is
always
very thought-provoking, of course.
It's always tension, and especially with Aristotle. When you look to Aristotle, where nature being in a society which was so many schools of thought were sprang simultaneously, he has to compete. And again, I guess we are not all perfect. Remember, we're all trying to say that it's a philosopher. He's a great man. How he did it? I look to myself and I say that's how many times I folded. I was not humble or wasn't proper or something like that. Even now, speaking up, for example. Sorry.
Very good.
By the way, that all Aristotle books translated into Syrian, then from Greek to the Syrian, then from the Syrian to Arabic. In the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, when was the Baghdad is the capital of culture.
Even to India.
Yes, it is. So there is a book, original books of Aristotle translated, and the copies of these books are available between any hand of the researchers.
There's one thing I recently learned about Aristotle. That is his contribution in physics. That during his time and during later on, all the way till medieval, people think the Earth actually is the center of the universe. Planets, sun, moon circle around Earth. They even have this very complicated calculation. But Aristotle, in some way, mentioned that actually Earth is not the center of the Earth. Until later on, physics proved what the planets orbit the Earth, and then found out, actually Aristotle was talking about that, but nobody paid attention to that. That time everybody all went with that the Earth was the center of the universe. That's what I recently learned from the documentary in physics.
Yeah, it's always Aristotle was the lost for time, yes, in the medieval times.
I also want to ask a question. I read some secondary material. I'll just report two extremes. Someone think the complete book Aristotle, every sentence is written by Aristotle. On the other extreme, that there's not even one work attributed to Aristotle is written by Aristotle. So any scholar here know the...
Yes, he was, there was a version that's a competing series, yes, that students recorded his lectures, and that lectures put it is organon and metaphysics and everything like that. But then there is a view that some of them actually written by him, but it's but the view was Ross, I guess, specializing in Aristotle, who argued that it was his students recorded his lectures.
But do you have a general idea which is or which isn't written by Aristotle?
But I guess my personal belief is we reading lectures. A lecture now is taken by students because there are something missing in a flow of the thought, because there is very argumentative, but I know that he was very argumentative, rational, but not to that degree. That was, or maybe his notes. Maybe his notes just, that's another thing.
I think that the name of his student that prepared his books in the logic and did you or something like that.
Metaphysics.
In the logic. But look, for the metaphysics, Aristotle don't say this is the metaphysics. But yes, collected and put it in the place after physics. Then the books that coming after physics,
Right.
the name of these books become metaphysics. But Aristotle don't say or don't say that these are books related with the metaphysics. Never. It is with the nature, only with the nature, not with the...
Every translation have that note. about
Yes.
that.
Other thoughts or reflections? Aristotle.
I also knew for a long time because I teach ethics and also teach logic. Aristotle, like the founding father of the syllogism. But when he talked about his ethics, he didn't actually use his own syllogism. He always talking about deal with case by case. There was no universal logical patterns in this of the problem. So now I always think about, that's interesting. He didn't practice his own syllogism when he talk about the eudaimonia, talk about the virtues.
Aristotle's one book is a less well known topic. You must heard about this. Talk about the question you mentioned.